I am Coyote, son of Adeyemi. The man at the gate looked like a ghost from another life. Thin frame, dusty shoes, eyes that carried years of silence. Inside the Adeyemi villa in Ikoyi, the morning sun bathed the courtyard. Aminatu counted numbers with little Ade beneath the mango tree. Tunde scanned headlines. Folake diced vegetables, her movements steady. Until the voice broke through. He screamed, "I don't want money. I just want to know where I belong." The knife slipped. Silence fell. A stranger had arrived, carrying a letter, a name, and a past no one was ready to face. Was he blood? Or a storm dressed as family? Unravel the mystery with Baobab African Tales. Subscribe and chase the truth. His name was Coyote, 34, slim as a reed, with a wiry strength built from years beneath hoods of battered cars. He had grown up in Ajegunle, one of Lagos' most unforgiving neighborhoods, a place where ambition had to wrestle with survival every single day. Coyote's mother, Mama Bola, died when he was only 9. She had worked as a street food vendor, selling akara and fried yam at the corner of Boundary Road. On her deathbed, she gave him a sealed letter and a broken pocket watch. The letter was her truth. The watch bore the name Adeyemi, etched in faded script. He kept that letter hidden for years, too afraid to read it, too young to understand. But when he finally unfolded it, at the age of 29, everything changed. In her trembling handwriting, Mama Bola had written, "Your father was Chief Adeyemi, a kind man, a man I loved, if only briefly. He never abandoned us. I left because I was told I wasn't welcome. If you ever seek him, it's not for wealth, but to know where you come from." Coyote waited 5 more years. Not out of hesitation, but necessity. Life in Ajegunle was a daily battle. He became a mechanic, working under hot sun and heavier debt. Yet, even amid hardship, he made room for kindness. Neighbors knew him as the boy who shares. He'd fix a single mother's fan belt without charge, bring cold sachets of water to school kids, or sit in silence with the neighborhood boys when they lost one of their own. But as he approached his mid-30s, something gnawed deeper. Identity, the question that never slept. He started digging, asking questions in Makoko, following whispers, tracing the old addresses in Surulere until someone remembered the Adeyemi name. He finally found the villa in Ikoyi, standing tall like a palace above the city. So when he stood at that gate, letter in hand, it wasn't pride he carried. It was hope. But Tunde saw only danger. Later that night, inside the brightly lit dining room of the Adeyemi home, silence stretched across a meal of moi and obe ata. The pounded yam remained untouched on Tunde's plate. "Hey, could be a fraud," Tunde muttered, pushing away his cup. "Or he could be your brother," Aminatu replied, her voice calm but firm. Folake, sitting at the head of the table, stared into her bowl. She knew. She had always known. Many years ago, her husband had told her the truth, that during a brief separation in their marriage, he had found solace elsewhere, and that elsewhere had been Mama Bola. Folake had begged him to keep it quiet. She was afraid for her young son, afraid of the whispers, the scandal. "Spare him this," she had pleaded. "Let our family have peace." Peace had come, but now the past had knocked. "We need to investigate," Folake said, her voice finally breaking the silence, "before we invite a stranger into our home." But Aminatu wasn't satisfied with caution. She knew what it was like to be dismissed. To be the girl from Makoko no one thought worthy of the Adeyemi name. The next day, she traveled to Ajegunle without telling anyone. There, she saw it with her own eyes. She watched Coyote from across the street as he crouched beside an old Peugeot, sweat dripping down his face, his hands black with grease. A woman with a crying toddler on her hip stood beside him. When the car roared back to life, Coyote refused her payment, just smiled and handed the child a biscuit. Aminatu's heart clenched. This was not a con artist. This was a man with dignity, despite his scars. Before leaving, she stopped by a buka and overheard the locals speak. That boy? He carries his pain quietly. But he's the reason many kids here still have shoes. She returned to Ikoyi, resolve in her chest. But she wasn't the only one watching. That evening, a woman named Lara arrived, a former friend of Mama Bola's. She claimed to know the full story, but she wanted money. Pay me, and I'll tell you what he's hiding. Tunde threw her out, but now his doubts had grown teeth. The storm wasn't over. It had just begun. Coyote's arrival had shaken the still waters of the Adeyemi household, but it was only the beginning. In the days that followed, silence tightened its grip on the villa in Ikoyi. Sundi buried himself in work, Folake grew quieter, and Aminatu moved with a determination that was quiet but sharp as a razor's edge. In a cramped one-room apartment in Ajegunle, Coyote sat beneath a flickering bulb, going through tools he couldn't afford to lose. The landlord had come twice this week, voice rising each time. Debts pressed in, but it wasn't money that weighed heaviest on Coyote. It was the past, the unanswered questions, the aching absence of a father. He came back to the villa twice more. Each time, Tunde stood at the gate, arms crossed, tone hard. If you want answers, Tunde had said, bring proof. Otherwise, don't come back. Coyote didn't argue. He simply nodded and walked away, shoulders heavy. One late afternoon, Aminatu found herself at the garage near Ajegunle Market. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. The air there smelled of engine oil, fried plantain, and fish roasting over makeshift grills. Children laughed somewhere nearby. She saw Coyote crouched beside a broken-down Okada. His hands blackened, face streaked with sweat. He was helping an elderly woman balance bags of cassava on her head while refusing her money. Later, over roasted corn, he spoke softly. My mother once waited outside your gate with a letter. She stood there for hours, but someone chased her away like she was filth. His voice didn't tremble, but Aminatu could feel the wound beneath it. It mirrored her own. Those early days when her love for Tunde had been questioned, her worth measured in pedigree. Back in Ikoyi, the sun painted golden shadows on the walls of the villa. Ade ran in circles, his laughter echoing as his small ball bounced past the gate. Coyote, walking by, caught it mid-air and knelt down. Here you go, little man. Ade giggled and threw it again. This time, Coyote kicked it back. It turned into a game. Hide-and-seek, tag, silly rhymes. For a few minutes, they played like they'd always known each other. From the balcony, Tunde watched. His jaw was tight. He's playing the long game, he muttered, getting close to the boy, to her. He's performing. That night, Tunde confronted Aminatu. I told you not to let him near this family. Aminatu stood her ground. You said the same about me once. Remember Makoko, the way your mother looked at me? He flinched. She continued, I know what it feels like to be pushed aside. He's not asking for money. He's asking for belonging. Tunde turned away, swallowing his fury. Later, Folake sat with her son in the quiet of the prayer room. The candlelight flickered against the walls. "Your father," she said, her voice low, "wanted to find that boy's mother, but I stopped him. I told him we'd lose everything if the press got wind of it." Toon stared into the flame. "Don't repeat my sin," Folake whispered. "You may be right to question him, but don't be cruel." Elsewhere, tension thickened. Aunt Laura, an old friend of Folake, who once nursed affections for the late Mr. Adiyami, began whispering in the market. She claimed Kayode was a fraud, a mechanic with a scheme. "Trust me," she told Tunde when he confronted her. "He's not who he says he is, but I can prove it, for a price." Tunde sent her away, but the seed was planted. Aminatu, however, found Lara days later and dug deeper. With careful words and woman-to-woman honesty, she uncovered the truth. Lara's jealousy dated back decades. Her resentment wasn't toward Coyote, but toward his mother, who had once stolen the affection she craved. It was a lie born from envy. Meanwhile, Uncle Bayo remained the family's loudest critic. "A bastard child from Ajegunle?" he scoffed. "He'll stain the Adiyemi name." But Aminatu invited him for buka lunch. She didn't warn him that Kayode would be there. They sat under a tin roof as rain drummed above them. Kayode shared his plate of amala with two street boys, wiping their faces with the edge of his own shirt. Uncle Bayo stared in silence. The walls of resistance began to crumble, and outside, in the glow of the streetlights, Kayode kicked a ball back to aid again, both of them laughing into the Lagos night. They still separated, not yet brothers, but no longer strangers. The rain had eased by dawn, but the weight in Aminatu's chest only grew heavier. Kayode hadn't shown up at the villa in days, and something gnawed at her. That morning, as she passed by the buka on her way to Makoko, she found him collapsed outside the gate, his body curled beside an oil-stained toolbox. The heat had broken him, and the burden he carried had pushed his body beyond its limit. Without hesitation, she bundled him into a kike napep and rushed him to the nearest hospital. Hours passed. IV bags dripped slow mercy into his veins. Coyote remained unconscious, his chest rising and falling like the tide. Aminatu sat beside him, fingers intertwined in prayer, her heart thumping with a mix of worry and resolve. When he finally woke, Coyote's voice was no louder than a whisper, but the weight it carried was deep. "My mother," he said, lifting a weak hand to his bag, "asked me never to forget who I am. She wrote this the week she passed. Said I should find him. Find the name that once called me son." He handed Aminatu a yellowing envelope, edges worn, the ink faded but legible. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning each trembling line. "My dearest Coyote, if you are reading this, I am gone. But know this, I loved your father once, deeply, briefly. He was a man with eyes like Lagos at night, bright and full of promise. He gave you his name, though the world never knew. He gave you a watch, engraved with Adeyemi, a small token, but real. I could not give you riches, but I gave you truth. Find him, if you must, but never beg to belong. Your blood already says you do. Maman." Aminatu folded the letter back slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. That evening, as the sky turned orange and the city softened into evening sounds, Tunde sat alone at a small buka on the edge of Obalande, his father's old haunt. When he'd come here with his father to laugh over meat and malt. A low voice caught his ear. "Uncle Coyote, Uncle, more meat, please." He turned and froze. At the corner table, Coyote sat cross-legged, surrounded by three barefoot kids in oversized shirts. One by one, he passed pieces of suya to their waiting hands, smiling even as his own plate remained nearly untouched. The moment burned into Tunde's mind. Something shifted. Later that night, back at the villa, Folake stepped into his study with a quiet firmness. "Tunde," she said, holding the same letter Aminatu had read hours earlier. "Your father wanted to find him. I stopped him. I told him to protect our name, our family. But what I did was steal something from that boy. A father's love. I won't do it again." Tunde stared at the letter, his throat tight. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I was proud. And scared. But now I'm just tired of the cost of silence." The next day, as the city bustled outside, Tunde returned to that buka. Coyote looked up, surprised, cautious. Tunde sat across from him. "When I was 8, Tunde began, my father brought me here after I failed an exam. He said, 'You can fail a class, but don't fail your people.' I didn't understand it then. Maybe I still don't. But I saw you yesterday. What you did. You reminded me of him." He took a deep breath. "I'd been afraid. Of losing what my father left. Of breaking the name we worked hard to rebuild. But you're not here to steal anything, are you?" Coyote shook his head, voice steady. "No. I only came to find my place. A name that meant something." Tunde nodded. "Then let's start there. Brother." The word hung in the air. Real. Solid. They stood, and for the first time, Tunde reached out. The two men embraced. Not with ease, not without scars, but with choice. Days later, under the mango tree at the Adeyemi villa, Aminatu hosted a small gathering. Uncle Bayo arrived, stiff and skeptical. Then Ade ran up to Coyote, arms open. "Uncle Coyote!" he squealed. The boy's joy was the final crack in the old man's armor. Bayo leaned over. "You've got your father's eyes," he said gruffly. "Don't waste them." Coyote smiled. The house, once echoing with suspicion, now hummed with something new, belonging. The evening sun bathed the courtyard of the Adeyemi villa in a golden glow, streaming through the leaves of the old mango tree. Under it, a long table had been set, covered in crisp white cloth, scattered with bowls of jollof rice, steaming egusi soup, thick rounds of pounded yam, and platters of fried plantain and akara. The rich aroma of home-cooked Yoruba food hung in the air, mingling with the laughter and soft hum of cicadas. Folake sat at the head of the table, her gele neatly tied, her face softer than it had been in weeks. She glanced across the table at Coyote, who now sat beside Tunde, no longer an outsider, but a brother restored. The scars in his eyes had begun to fade, replaced by something steadier. Belonging. When little Ayatunde passed him a sticky piece of akara with both hands, Coyote let out a low, surprised chuckle. "Thank you, champ." Aminatu smiled at the two, brushing crumbs off her son's shirt, then leaned in and whispered to him, "That's your Uncle Coyote now. He loves you very much." Coyote's gaze flicked upward, catching Tunde's eyes across the table. Tunde raised a glass. "To Dad," he said, "to second chances, and to the family we never knew we were missing." There was a brief silence, and then Folake spoke, her voice warm and clear. "Today, our family is whole. Not because everything is perfect, but because we've chosen to love beyond the past. That is legacy. That is strength." The clinking of glasses followed. Plates were passed. Stories were told. The tension of the past weeks seemed to evaporate into the Lagos dusk. Later that night, Tunde walked with Coyote toward the far end of the garden. "I've been thinking," Tune said. "There's a project we're funding in Ajigunle. Education and tools for youth. Maybe you can lead it. Help some of those kids like the ones you used to look after. Coyote's voice was quiet but sure. You'd trust me with that? I trust who you've shown me you are, Tunde replied. Not because of a name or a bloodline, but because of how you showed up, even when no one asked you to. Coyote nodded, emotion catching in his throat. He turned to see Ade dashing across the grass, laughing freely as children do. He stooped, caught the boy mid-run, hoisting him up into the air. The child squealed with joy. Behind them, Aminatu and Folake watched from the patio. Folake reached over and gently held her daughter-in-law's hand. You reminded us, she said softly, that family isn't only about blood. It's about heart. And yours brought this home back to life. Aminatu, eyes glistening, gave a small nod. We all have holes in our story, but sometimes it's in the cracks that the light enters. In that moment, as the wind rustled the leaves and laughter drifted under the moon, something eternal settled among them. A peace that didn't erase pain, but honored it. A joy that didn't deny struggle, but grew from it. Because in the Adeyemi family, once broken by silence, love had spoken louder. Listen, in the heart of Africa, families often hold their breath behind silence. Wounds buried, names unspoken. But sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with listening. Coyote didn't come seeking wealth. He came searching for a name, for a home to call his own. And what he found, through the quiet bravery of Aminatu, the honesty of Tunde, and the redemption of Folake, was a truth deeper than blood. Family is built not only on lineage, but on love that stays, forgives, and welcomes. Compassion, like Aminatu's, is not weakness. It's the strongest force a home can carry.